I'm Dr. Pete Economo, the East Coast psychologist,
And I'm Dr. Nikki Rubin, the West Coast psychologist.
and this is When East
Meets West.
Recently, Nikki, they invited me onto Fox 5 again to talk about screen fatigue, which has now become a term that is all too common in our language, right, Nikki? Hey.
Oh, I I suffer from serious screen fatigue, as I'm sure many of our listeners are these days. Living, just living in this two-dimensional world. Even right now, Pete and I are talking over Zoom here.
You look great today.
Oh, so do you. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I notice myself imposing my fatigue on others. So like any of the groups I'm a part of. So I'm an advisor to one of these student groups, and I was like, guys, I don't think we should be doing any more meetings online. Like, let's wait for the weather to get better, or whatever. But then they were able to give me some feedback of like, well, like for childcare, it's a little bit easier, and some of the benefits of being in front of these screens in the virtual world that what we're living in. But today, Nikki and I, let's discuss the impact of screen fatigue on us today in 2021.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, of course, what you're saying is important there, Pete, because you're highlighting a dialectic, right? Which is nothing, nothing is all good or all bad. And so I don't think that what you're saying is you imposing your fatigue on other people. I think what you're saying is that, there are also benefits to the virtual world, right? Like that, like some people are saying it's maybe easier with childcare. I'm thinking of this is, very psychologist specific thing, but like there was like a conference over the summer I attended that was virtual that usually is international that I would never normally go to because it's just not something I want to spend my money on. I don't want to spend thousands of dollars to go to to a psychology conference, though I've always been bummed I couldn't go, and like now I could go because it's virtual. There's benefits in that way. And even though there are benefits, our brains are still being impacted by literally looking at a screen.
Yeah, because I don't even want to
day
go to
long.
those conferences. Like I know it is nice that we could maybe save some money, but like I don't know. Again, I might just be stuck in the old time, but it's just not the same. And I just don't want to do it. I don't know. That's just me.
Well, no, I hear that. Well, I think so. So it's like using that example. It's like for me, I'm the opposite. I'm like, I don't want to go in person usually. So I like the access of being able to hear speakers. Like,
Right.
I literally, I mean, this is such an LA thing. Over the summer, I literally attended the conference from my phone at the beach. I was like, I'm at the beach, and I was actually,
You and I have
literally
had several conversations like that, actually.
Yeah, so we have.
And I've enjoyed every moment of them.
Yeah, so we have.
Yeah.
So that part's a benefit, though. I think maybe what you're saying is like, I don't want to do it. It's like because we're missing. I mean, again, I don't miss the conference part of this, but just in general, we're missing being in the room with other human beings, and I think that's something a lot of people kind of. I mean, not leave out completely in the pandemic. We're recognizing we're missing being around other humans, but they're forgetting that that's part of screen fatigue, that we derive energy from being in the presence of other humans. And while
That's
it's
right.
great to be able to, like right now, Pete and I are looking at each other, that's wonderful. It's not the same as getting to be in the same airspace as you, right? Like it's a two-dimensional version of you. Like my brain did not evolve to feel connection through a flat screen.
So a definition from Psychiatric Times, and they call it Zoom fatigue. I mean, I wanted to generalize it and call it screen fatigue. That's what I did for my piece on Fox 5 New York, because it's not just Zoom. I feel like as we're all
phones,
turning
it's
we're
like,
all improving Zoom stock, which I'm okay with because I own a little bit of it. But so Zoom fatigue describes the tiredness, worry, or burnout associated with overusing virtual platforms of communication. Like other experiences associated with the coronavirus pandemic, Zoom fatigue is widely prevalent, intense, and completely new.
And well, that part, I'm going to say, I disagree with that last part a little. I think we have been
Nikki.
Yes, I'm going to disagree a little, only in that because we've been moving towards this in the digital era, right? Like I think that now, obviously, just like this is like the only way pretty much that we're communicating with other humans. Of course, the pervasiveness of it is just like there's no way to ignore it. Though we've been experiencing this like ever since like the invention of the smartphone, or just
Yeah.
any kind of computer. Like we've been
But
moving
not to
towards
this
this.
level. That's
No,
the
not
intense. That's why
true.
intensity is there.
Yes,
In
that's
fact, the
right.
reporter for our segment focused on scheduling and how challenging scheduling gets. And I'm wondering if you feel that or have clients that do. I know I certainly feel it, where you're squeezing things in because you can, because you're virtual.
Yeah, right. Because you just click on the next meeting. Yeah.
Because you click on the next meeting and then you're ending up having to go for like jumping from one screen to the next. Many of us, if we're privileged enough, we have several devices. And so we're going from one device and one platform to the next. And even as we started today's recording, we're trying to get some new technology up and running. I mean,
yes.
These are all barriers of, it's like using a new part of your brain.
Yeah, it is. And a part of our brains, again, I'm going to bring it back to the evolutionary component here, right? Is that, evolution did not, create human brains that were meant to be interacting with technology in this way. Like this is a very new contextual experience that we don't have like historical ancient precedent. We talk a lot on this podcast about like 40,000 years ago, like what was happening. Like there's no like 40,000 years ago when our brains were, in two-dimensional communication with other humans, like that didn't exist. Like this is, and that's what's so exhausting to our brains, right? Like
Nikki.
Okay, that part.
Maybe.
Yes. Yes. I was saying the pervasiveness is new, but yes, new. Yes. New.
Do I hear you retracting your defense of that definition from psychiatric science?
Just amending, just flexibly amending, right?
Well,
but you know what I mean? Like that there's
beautiful modeling. Thank you. Well, people, and we're on our phones a lot. And so I think it'll be interesting to see the research come out post-pandemic in terms of maybe increase of usage, because before the pandemic, the data indicated that people use their phones on average around 3 hours and 50 minutes a day, with millennials about 5.7 hours a day. There is no doubt that has increased.
Oh, I mean, I can tell you from my own personal, when it's like, show me how many hours, I'm like, that is horrifying. Yeah, that is horrifying. I'm like,
and I really encourage people and listeners, use screen time. It's many of us are vulnerable or we're afraid to do so. And when you do, you realize how you could likely intervene in your own life very easily. I joke and say to some folks that I work with that I got a PhD just to help people not use their phones.
Right. Which when you started your PhD, that wasn't something that you would have. That wasn't a thing, right? That wasn't a thing.
We so old.
I know. I'm like, yeah, elder millennials, as they believe they refer to us.
Yes, we are.
Yes. Yeah. Though, as I said before, I still prefer Gen Y. But anyway, okay. So back to screen fatigue here. So look, I think that another piece of this that's really important to bring in here is also how screen fatigue is impacting concentration, our ability to concentrate. Because I know something I've personally experienced, and I've definitely talked about with patients and friends, is like I've been having. I love to read, and I have undergrad degrees in literature. I love books, and I've been finding, and I'll say, and I don't have ADHD. I treat a lot of ADHD. I don't personally have it, and I have the experience of like high distractibility when I'm trying to read now in a way that like my ADHD patients will report, and it's just, I think being on screen, it's like it's changing how my brain is able to focus. Like I'm not like, do you know what I'm saying? Do you have?
Well, I notice that quite physically, where if I'm on my phone and I look up to like watch a basketball game that's on, or a soccer match or something, and it takes me about 30 seconds for my eyes to readjust to the TV. And those are some symptoms of screen fatigue. So like eye strain, blurred vision, headaches, neck and back pain, and of course issues with concentration and attention that we see a lot, especially from the neuropsychological literature. So I mean, who's not feeling that these days?
Right. And I think, it is of course important to weave in here like a degree of acceptance around the context that we're in, that this is not forever. To bring in the Buddhist concept of impermanence, right? Like that this is temporary. And to go back to my argument from before, it's also not totally going away, that we've been moving towards this, that as the digital world just is a part of our human experience,
Right.
it is important for us to understand, the impact that it's going to have on our functioning, and how are we going to both accept that that's going to impact us in ways that aren't helpful,
Yeah.
and also try to mitigate it.
Well, even like, just telemedicine. I mean, watching my mom's husband be able to go to the VA virtually, we had to set up a computer for him to do that. And that's wonderful. I mean, so I think that there are certainly going to be benefits coming from this. One of the things that you and I talked about, pre-recording was like the sleep issues that this is creating. So what are you seeing in your clinical practice around the impact of screen fatigue on sleep?
Well, I definitely would say it's, we talk a lot about sleep hygiene on this podcast, just the negative impact on sleep hygiene, because there's less to do, right? So there's, and phones and computers, and obviously just being on screens most of the day, people are spending more time interacting with the blue light. And so for those listeners that aren't familiar with that, blue light is what is emitted from our devices. And there's research that shows that it basically, like, correct me if I'm wrong here, Pete, it like basically hits a certain part of the eye, then sends a signal to the brain to release a wakefulness chemical. And so that is why, if you ever read sort of like basic sleep hygiene recommendations, they tell you to turn off your devices at least an hour before bed. So your brain is not telling you to wake up when you're trying to wind down.
Right.
So pre-pandemic, pre-living on Zoom, we were already experiencing more time on with blue light than we were before, but now it's like way turned up. So I'm seeing that as a huge impact. Are you?
Yeah, well, the blue light, the blue wavelengths, and what it does is neurologically, it boosts attention, reaction times, and mood. So if and I'm going to put this out there that maybe like 90% of people, one of the last things they look at before they go to bed is a phone or a device.
Well, absolutely, and that's
it's probably higher.
It's probably higher. I mean, and that's where you and I really work with patients to say, like, I tell people, like, look, if an hour is too much, like, try to turn off a half hour before. Right? Anything to decrease the time that you're, looking at screens before going to bed, just in the service of orienting your brain back to the way it was designed. We were not designed to interact with these devices. And again, that doesn't mean that we can't learn to interact with them effectively, though we do just want to understand, the I'm going to keep saying like the evolutionary history or the biological function of how the brain
so biologically, which is really interesting about blue light, because again, 40,000 years ago, there were not this level of blue light. It actually, the blue light suppresses melatonin for about twice as long as the green light. So it really, it affects the circadian rhythm double. So 3 hours versus 1.5 hours is the impact that has on our circadian rhythm, which is our sleep-wake cycle. And that's the cycle that's been totally hijacked.
Yes.
In life, and certainly during a pandemic.
Yeah, like way turned up, right?
Yeah,
That's what you're saying.
yeah,
way turned up.
Yeah.
Well, and this kind of, makes me think about like something we say a lot as well, which is like, this is why it's so helpful to understand how our brains work, right? Because if we're not aware of how our brains work, we're not as equipped to interact with them more effectively. So again, we're not, Pete and I aren't saying on this podcast, like, don't be on the computer ever, or don't use your phones. Like, no, we radically accept that's a part of experience of life.
But don't do it before you go to bed.
Right.
I mean, I do say don't be on your phone at least an hour before your bedtime.
Yeah, no, and same. And that's where if someone's really pushing me on that, I'll say like, fine, let's split the difference and make it a half hour. Right.
Exactly.
Sure.
That's better than nothing.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well,
You're such a good bargainer. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was like middle path here. So what else are you doing clinically with people, Pete, to help reduce screen fatigue?
Well, the self-care is critical. The sleep hygiene, I don't care how many times we say it on here, we'll keep saying it. Boundaries around the phone. So definitely, no matter if you have an Android or an Apple, using some sort of screen time app or measurement so that you can really boundary how much time. It's scary when you look and see, and then just even if you can like pick your top 2 or 3 apps that you're spending the most time on and just reduce an hour, reduce 30 minutes, like take small steps, remembering to celebrate the small victories, a big, piece of the mindfulness practice. And then just find what, one of the things I keep hearing myself say recently, and we say that a lot here, and this is perhaps the Eastern spin that I bring, is just really connecting with your spirit. Because what is this all about? and why are we doing what we're doing? And I think that piece, that spiritual piece, whatever it is. So for listeners, what is that spiritual piece that allows you to really create meaning in your suffering? We all suffer. Suffering's natural. And, that we want to just try and find a way, to suffer in a way that it makes sense to us.
Well, I think that's very lovely. And what was coming to my mind as you were saying that was two things. I was thinking both how might I connect with, with spirit, my spirit, which of course I also hear in that, like with my values, both when I'm needing to engage on a screen,
right,
and then also when I want to step away from it. And I was thinking that for me personally, and hopefully this resonates with those listening, even when I'm having moments of like feeling the physiological impact of being on a screen all day and feeling tired, my eyes are hurting, and I'm feeling less energized. When I'm working with patients, or like even again right now, I'm going to keep coming back to this example with Pete. It's like I'm connecting with gratitude that I'm able to have this connection. Like I keep thinking, like in the, in 1918 in the influenza pandemic, like I go, gosh, wow, like, no one had that kind of option.
I tell that story all the time because
yeah,
it's helpful for especially certain age groups to think about that. And I think I've shared that here, that my grandma was born in 1918.
I don't think you have. I don't
Oh,
know.
well, she's like part of my passcode. So now you'll know. Just part. So you
yeah,
don't know all.
I was to say, better change that
better
now.
Be careful.
Yeah, better be careful.
I'm not that afraid. My mom and dad listening, they won't be able to. No. So like thinking, what did they do? And I think that's what I'm at least helping for some perspective taking with people today when they're like, this is so terrible. I'm locked up. Like you're taking my rights away. And it's like, and yet we're still meeting right now over video.
Yes.
Which
So
100 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to do that.
Right. So it's that dialectic, right? Of like, yes, it's hard. And like, this is where we can connect. And then I would say then the other side though, is like, we also do need to get away from the screens. I mean, I tell people even like, go outside for 5 minutes, even just go to the window. Like in my office, I have a very sunny office, like with a lovely view, and it's in a building where the windows are open, but it's like sometimes in between patients, I'll just like stand at the window and just like enjoy the sunshine. I mean, it's like,
that's beautiful, and that's all that it would. That's so much. That's mind, that's body, and that's spirit right there, because you're able to really just let go of whatever maybe you were holding from that last session. You're able to really say like, there's this whole thing going on outside my office right now, which is so beautiful.
Right.
And stunning. In Buddhism, as we've talked about the Eightfold Path a lot, I'm going to take a moment to talk about right effort, which is one that I haven't talked about, because I think that that's what this takes right now.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, what's my commitment? What is my effort right now to say, I'm going to let FOMO, fear of missing out, or something else go, and just really say, I need this for me right now. So before all this screen time was increasing, we knew social media and screens were increasing depression and anxiety. There's a clear connection. And yet we continue to increase our usage.
Yeah, because it's easier, right? This goes back to also, right? It's so available. I mean, we've obviously, our social media episode, we talk about this, like these are how these things are designed, right? It gets this, it's like a dopamine shot to the brain, right? So we do it because it's easier, it's available, and our brains like convenience.
It's so quick too. It's
so
immediate. And that's what the brain that's the pleasure that the brain seeks. So the right effort is trying to like prevent unwholesome states. And all of us that have been in front of that screen have felt unwholesome in a moment because we're not doing something like genuine.
You have to say more about that word. I like that phrasing, unwholesome. It's interesting. It's an interesting phrase or word.
The Buddhists have a way with words.
Yeah, I do. Well, I love me some words.
You love some words.
I do.
My little wordsmith over there.
I know.
Well, it's when you've gone down a social media or a news rabbit hole, you feel dirty. I mean, I'm being a little provocative in that.
Right. You are. Yes. Yeah.
I'll own it.
Or I would say maybe the word I would use is icky.
Icky.
Or just as soon as I say this, patients, I'll go like, it's not a very clinical world. I'm like,
icky.
It's icky.
Yeah. So that is not unwholesome. And so just, reset to the next moment. And so that's what I often will share that with clients, where I'll say like, I'm not judging myself when I'm going down the rabbit hole. I'm noticing it, and then I'm committing to the next moment, and I get out of it. So my screen time is low because I'm able to notice when I'm getting pulled in, take a step back out and find something that's wholesome.
Like
which
values connected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pete, because I know we're
wrapping
coming up on time
Yeah.
here, though. I do really want to hear your perspective on this. Something I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, which is again this concept of you know, being on screens all the time is taking away this very literal experience of being around other humans. And
hmm
something I talk about with patients quite a bit that, this is, I always say, like, look, we don't have the Western scientific tools to measure this yet, though I suspect we will be able to at some point, which is like the vibes we get from other people, the
That's right.
energy we feel,
Yep.
which ask any human, and we know that that's a real thing.
hmm
And not having that, it decreases our energy. I certainly feel that at work, not seeing
Yes.
patients live. I miss seeing my people in my
Yeah.
office.
Yeah.
And I'm just so curious if Buddhism has anything to say about that, about that, it's this both tangible and untangible experience of energy, of human connection. Is there anything you're aware of that speaks to that?
So our reporters and our engineers gave us some good literature on that to report. So no. I mean, I think what we would say in the Eastern tradition is that like everything is energy and everything's connected, and it really depends on the lineage that you're studying. So like my White Plum Zen lineage is really about more untangling, silence, whereas some of the Tibetan literature is about connection. So that
Okay.
when I'm walking in the park, I am the tree. I
Okay.
am the ants that I'm walking on,
Mm,
and I think that energy is what we're taught, what we're, what
yeah.
we're calling out to, what we're just asking listeners to really consider, so I think as we screen fatigue is real. It is intense. Contrary to what Dr. Nikki said, it is new in a very proverbial way. But to think about your dukkha, and that's the word of suffering, in Sanskrit, and that there's meaning in all of our suffering, and that just create some right effort as you're trying to step away and notice what it is about your dukkha and why you're here.
This has been When East Meets West. I'm Dr. Pete Economo.
And I'm Dr. Nikki Rubin. Be present, be brave.
This has been When East Meets West. All material is based on opinion and educational training of Drs. Pete Economo and Nikki Rubin.
Content is for informational and educational purposes only.